I'm Matt McClure, and this is Currents. The same-sex marriage debate continues in New York. We'll have the latest. Plus, he says God got him through the storm. A priest who survived the Joplin tornado tells his story.
God allows things to happen, and we don't know why. But when we look back, we always hear the good things that happened as a result.
And church and the home. Are they one and the same?
I think that as parents, you just have to work a lot harder to try to push through all the other information that kids are getting to teach them more about the teachings of the church.
Well, good evening, and thanks so much for joining us. New York State politics has certainly been making some headlines here lately. Just last night, as a matter of fact, in a major upset, a Democrat managed to edge out a Republican and win a congressional seat in a very red district in western New York. In Albany, the potential legalization of same-sex marriage has been another headline topper. And with just a few weeks left in the legislative session, the clock is ticking on a vote for one of Governor Andrew Cuomo's top legislative priorities. The governor's commitment to passing the controversial bill seemed to waver a bit of late, despite this week's release of a high-profile video urging New Yorkers to contact their legislators on the measure. Cuomo has publicly stated that he will not bring the legislation to the Senate floor if it did not have the votes to pass. Well, when the measure came up for a vote back in 2009, you might remember, 8 Senate Democrats joined with every single Republican to vote no on the bill, and it was soundly defeated. So, will that be the case this go around if same-sex marriage sees the light of day on the floor? Well, to look at that question and some more, I'm joined now by Kathleen Gallagher, Director of Pro-Life Activities for the New York State Catholic Conference. Kathy, thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Well, so what about that question? Is it going to come up for a vote, do you think, first of all, and what are the chances of it passing if it does?
Well, that is the $60 million question. We certainly are hopeful that it's not going to come up for a vote, but I would give it a 50-50 shot at this point in time. It certainly may come up for a vote. The legislature is scheduled to end their legislative session on June 20th. So as you say, the clock is certainly ticking. And the governor has said he will not put a bill forward if he can't count the Senate votes to pass it. As of this point in time, those votes are not there. There are only 26 committed Senate votes to vote in favor of same-sex marriage. 32 are needed to pass a bill. So they've got some ways to go, but there are a number of senators who are kind of iffy at this point.
Are any of those senators who are kind of iffy right now, as you say, are any of those local for us, Brooklyn and Queens folks?
Well, yes, there are 3 senators who I would note within the boundaries of the Brooklyn-Queens diocese, 3 senators who are all Democrats who all voted against gay marriage in 2009. Senator Shirley Huntley from Jamaica, Queens, Senator Joe Addabbo from the Howard Beach, Glendale, Ridgewood, Woodhaven section of Queens, and Senator Carl Kruger from Brooklyn. All of them voted no on gay marriage in 2009. However, all of them are under enormous pressure from within the Democratic Party and from the gay rights advocates to change their vote. So they really need to be hearing from their constituents to say to them, no, we believe in genuine traditional marriage. A mother and a father both matter to children. We need the constituents calling them and sending them emails and sending them letters as soon as possible.
Sure. Getting to sort of the meat of the issue here, Kathy, Governor Cuomo, in the video that I mentioned a little bit earlier, he said, and this is a quote, he said, "This is a matter of fairness and equality. This is not a question of religion or culture, but a question of legal rights and government policy." He said, when it comes to fighting for what's right, New Yorkers wrote the book, and marriage equality is the next chapter of our civil rights story. What is your reaction to that? I imagine the Catholic Conference sees things a little differently.
Yes. I mean, many, like the governor, have tried to say this has nothing to do with religion. But when you look at the potential consequences of a same-sex marriage law on religious liberty and freedom of conscience, there are tremendous consequences, dangerous consequences that could result. And we've seen it result. You know, some people say, oh, it's all, you're making that up, it's all a fairy tale. But we've seen it happen in other states and other jurisdictions. Here's the problem, Matt. There are many laws on the books right now in New York State that say you can't discriminate. And you can't discriminate on the basis of marital status. You can't discriminate in education, employment, housing, public accommodations. There's tons of places where you can't discriminate.
Right.
Well, that means that, for example, any of our church agencies, like Catholic Charities or Catholic hospitals, Catholic schools, could be denied state funding or state contracts if they are found to be discriminating against same-sex marriage. So, for example, if one of our social service agencies does marriage counseling, they could be required to counsel same-sex couples or lose their public funding, lose their grants, lose their licenses to operate. I mean, these are very significant questions. Right. There's also the possibility of exclusion from public property or public facilities. For example, a couple weeks ago, and I think your station reported on it, the Knights of Columbus held a prayer rally outside the state capitol. Knights of Columbus is a Catholic fraternal organization that believes in traditional marriage. If they were found to be discriminating on the basis of marital status because they believe in traditional marriage, they could be denied the right to have a peaceful prayer rally on the grounds of the state capitol.
And one more thing, Kathy, just because we're very short on time here, just wanted to get to kind of a last point. There are a lot of people who, of course, see this, as the governor said, as a civil rights issue. They say that it really boils down to two people who are of the same sex or of opposite sex, two consenting adults who love each other should be able to make a lifetime commitment, and it should be recognized in law. Quickly here, why is that point not the case?
You know what? There are many, many laws on the books in New York State that grant homosexual persons who are in domestic partnerships, who are domestic partners, all the rights that heterosexual people have. Bereavement rights, hospital visitation rights. The governor is fond of saying they don't have those rights, but in fact they do. Over the last 10 years, New York State has provided many, many rights to domestic partners. But what we can't do is redefine what marriage is. Marriage is one man, one woman. It's about procreation and nurturing of children for the stability of our society.
All right, Kathy Gallagher, Director of Pro-Life Activities with the New York State Catholic Conference. Thanks so much for taking some time out for us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks. Well, stay tuned. There's much more Currents ahead. Coming up, a story of survival. This priest made it through the Joplin tornado, and he'll share his amazing story.
I said, you know, God, if this is what meant to be, I said, you know, how much I love you.
Welcome back. 2011 is already the worst year in 6 decades when it comes to U.S. deaths from severe weather. About 500 people have been killed in storms so far this year. At least 10 of those deaths happened in Oklahoma Tuesday night when a tornado tore a path of destruction through the state. This is video of the damage in Canadian County where 7 people died. The twister flattened homes, buildings, and an animal shelter in the county. And even some employees at the Storm Prediction Center in Norman, Oklahoma, had to take shelter as a tornado approached. Well, meanwhile, the death toll in Joplin, Missouri continues to climb. At least 123 people are now confirmed dead in that city, where an EF5 tornado, that's the most destructive classification, flattened homes and businesses on Sunday evening. Pope Benedict sent his condolences to the people of Joplin yesterday in a letter to Springfield Cape Girardeau Bishop James Johnston. The letter said the Pope was following the situation with deep concern and that he was praying for the victims and their families. Now, in the meantime, Bishop Johnston visited Joplin yesterday to meet with survivors and tour the wreckage of St. Mary's Church, which was destroyed by the twister. Reports say the bishop comforted survivors and expressed gratitude that more people did not die. Well, the pastor of St. Mary's Church was in the rectory when the storm hit. And as CNN's Jackie Jarris reports, Father Justin Monahan credits his faith with seeing him through.
This was the building you were in?
Yes.
There's almost nothing left but rubble of Father Justin Monahan's rectory behind St. Mary's Catholic Church, where he has served his community for the past 15 years. He survived the tornado by seeking haven in what he had always heard was the safest place, the bathroom.
I got in the bathtub, face down, tried to cover my head, and I heard this noise. And I thought, oh, what is happening? I lay there, I just prayed and said, thy will be done. And I decided to wait till the end of the noise, and then I opened that door and everything was blocking it. It was all covered there.
He waited there, trapped for nearly an hour after the tornado had passed, before his parishioners managed to find him.
And I hollered at the top of my voice because there was water dripping and making noise. I said, where are you? And I pulled some kind of a board, like you see the boards there. I pulled one off and I put it in the air.
Amazingly, he was uninjured and says God got him through the storm. What was going through your mind at the time? You said you were praying?
I was, and you know, for some reason, I was okay. I said, you know, God, if this is what it's meant to be, I said, you know, how much I love you.
The parishioners who have shown up to help are also leaning heavily on their faith.
Sometimes you think that it happens to bring people closer together and helps you put life in perspective.
And while there is nearly nothing left of the church, the metal cross stands tall over miles of devastation.
I saw the cross yesterday passing through nearby. I thought, how powerful, and it gives us hope that God is still with us.
Father Monahan says Joplin is a faith-based community, but many still ask why they've been burdened with such a terrible tragedy.
God allows things to happen, and we don't know why. But when we look back, we always hear the good things that happened as a result.
Just an amazing story. Well, stay with us. There is much more currents ahead. More brouhaha in Rome over a statue of Pope John Paul II that, well, not very many people seem to like at all. That story and the rest of the day's headlines next. Welcome back to Currents. I'm Matt McClure. Coming up in just a bit, bringing the church into the home. But first, let's have a look at the day's headlines. Well, despite threats of tight security, more than 10,000 Chinese Catholics flocked to the Shishan Marian Shrine on the outskirts of Shanghai yesterday. They came for the annual Day of Prayer for the Catholic Church in China. Pope Benedict started that event back in 2007. The website UCA News reporting that China's so-called underground Catholics had been warned not to go to the shrine in May. A source told the website that underground priests celebrated masses at private homes yesterday with twice the attendance of normal weekday masses. Well, back in this country, news from Florida, where a state commission determined the Diocese of St. Augustine likely discriminated against Hispanic employees during last year's restructuring. According to the Gainesville Sun, Hispanic employees at St. Augustine Church in Gainesville claimed they were fired and then hired back at lesser pay, while white employees were given raises and fewer responsibilities. The diocese is disputing the state panel's finding, saying the cuts were made purely because of the budget. A lawyer for the state Hispanic workers there says that they will ask the state commission to mediate the matter. Well, San Francisco's Archbishop is joining the voice of opposition to a ballot initiative to ban circumcision. The measure, which San Franciscans will vote on coming up in November, would ban circumcisions for any male under the age of 18. It does include an exception for medical necessity, but not for religious belief. Violators could be fined up to $1,000 and imprisoned for up to a year. In a letter to the San Francisco Chronicle, Archbishop George Niederauer called the measure a misguided initiative. He cited concerns over religious freedom and health. Well, Texas has become the latest state to require women seeking abortions to undergo sonograms. A new measure also requires doctors to make the fetus's heartbeat audible to the mother. Yesterday, Governor Rick Perry attended a ceremonial signing of the law.
That Texas is a state that respects and defends life. No telling how many lives, there's been countless lives saved because of what you've done. And there are going to be many, many more because of this legislation.
Well, that new law goes into effect on September 1st. Now, women can opt out of seeing the sonogram, but in most cases, doctors would still be able to, or still be required, rather, to describe the images. Well, first, it was the Vatican's newspaper, and now a cardinal at the Holy See is criticizing a new statue of Blessed John Paul II. Rome Reports has the details.
Vatican officials are expressing their dismay toward the new John Paul II statue in front of Rome's main train station. Cardinal Gianfranco Ravasi said the Vatican gave its okay based on a sketch by the artist, but the final version was not what they had in mind when approving the sketch. They say the end result doesn't resemble the late Pope.
The feedback that we gave was for a sketch that was very attractive, in which John Paul II extended his cloak to almost ideally shelter the city under it. The implementation is quite different in respect to the original drawing that was given to us, so our positive opinion, in a way, related to another work.
Even the Vatican newspaper said the towering modernistic statue gives the impression a bomb hit the square. The enormous 16-foot bronze statue has brought on a lot of controversy, not only in the church but also with local residents, many of whom have called for its removal.
Already the mayor of Rome said, even if not officially, that he would like a sort of referendum among the Roman citizens, whether to keep the statue in that place or to move it somewhere else. And no doubt the location made sense, because ideally it was John Paul II welcoming everyone who arrived in Rome, coming into the city through the Termini station. So the location is correct. The subject may be questionable, and so a possible transfer is understandable.
The unveiling of the statue was meant to close the beatification ceremonies, but it appears the statue of John Paul II may not have found its final resting place.
Well, in other news from the Vatican, representatives for the sainthood cause of Archbishop Fulton Sheen presented papers on Sheen's life to Pope Benedict today. At the end of the Pope's weekly audience, Peoria Bishop Daniel Jenke and Father Stanley Deptula, the executive director of the Fulton Sheen Foundation, presented the Pope with 2 volumes on Sheen. The Emmy Award-winning Archbishop was a fixture on TV back in the 1950s and 60s as host of the television show Life is Worth Living. Sheen was also the president of the Society for the Propagation of the Faith, which works to spread the gospel message in non-Catholic countries. Well, a pro-life organization is asking MTV to reconsider its decision to pull an ad from its airwaves. The ad features a woman who discovers she's pregnant and does not know where to turn. At the end of the ad, women are offered phone and text numbers to contact for more information. A spokesman for MTV, though, told Fox News that the ad was pulled because of the controversy over the billboard in Soho that read, "The most dangerous place for an African American is in the womb." Life Always, the group behind that ad, has close ties to Heroic Media. That's the organization behind this TV commercial. And from MTV to reality TV, producer Mark Burnett, best known for the shows Survivor and The Apprentice, is reportedly set to produce a docudrama on the Bible. According to The Hollywood Reporter, the program is set to air in 2013 on the History Channel. Burnett and his wife, actress Roma Downey, who's best known for her work on the series Touched by an Angel, will produce it. The 10-hour series will air in 5 parts. Stay tuned, there's much more Currents ahead. When we return, what is the domestic church? Turns out it's closer than you may think.
Parents have to have their priorities straight. And that means that they have to have the courage to say, this is what is good for my family, and this is not, even though there's a lot of pressure to do the other thing.
Well, finally tonight, if I asked you to draw a picture of a church, chances are a significant number of you would draw a typical church building here. Let's see, let me draw a couple of walls there, maybe a window or two, Some steps leading up to it, little path here. And then, of course, the steepled roof with a cross on the top also. Might look something like this. Not bad, huh? For a quick little drawing. Okay, so I didn't draw it that fast. I thank another artist that works here for doing that. But the picture probably will end up looking something like that if you're that good of an artist, unlike me. But it won't end up looking like your apartment or your home. But if it did, by chance, that would probably be the perfect replication of your domestic church. Yeah. Well, just exactly what is the domestic church? Well, we'll find out coming up in just a moment. But next year, you know, around this time, the Vatican's going to be hosting a celebration of the family and the domestic church. It's themed The Family, Work and Celebration. Now, couples from across the globe will gather in Rome to discuss the role of the Christian family in shaping faith and living it publicly in our homes and in the world. But such a celebration came early to the Church of St. Thomas More in Manhattan. Back in April, men and women gathered to learn more about the experience of their faith and their church in the familiar surroundings, not necessarily of buildings that look like this, but buildings that look like, I don't know, ones that contain living rooms and kitchen tables.
In the early church, the family was described as the domestic church. It was seen not only as a sociological unit, but as a unity which was created to play a specific role in God's plan of salvation.
We have a lot of young families in this parish, and we discussed with a number of the mothers the need for some guidance in terms of how to help raise Catholic children.
The pressure and influence of society on the family today is immense, and its stranglehold can only be broken by a conscious decision and a determined effort by parents, preferably while the children are still very young or even before they are born. We don't have a Christian society as we used to. I would say that here in the States it's probably still predominantly Christian, but it's gotten very, very secular. And this means that the support of the society is not there for parents. And then their children leave Christ, leave the church, have great difficulties, and this baffles the parents, and it also is very painful for them. An active and sometimes even aggressive interest in what your children are learning at school is absolutely necessary. In addition, the formal education attained in school has to be supplemented by the continual education at home. Parents have to understand that the responsibility they have for their children is a whole responsibility, and responsibility for the entire person, and not just for food, clothing, education in the secular way. And if they don't nurture also the spiritual dimension, they also are failing their children. A Catholic atmosphere must be cultivated and must permeate the home in such a way that the home is at once an oasis in the midst of the world and a training ground for spiritual warfare with the prince of the world.
This was a good talk. You don't hear enough about family life. Even in the parish homilies, you don't really hear about what to do and how to handle all the issues that are out there.
I'm not sure that it's the fault of the church. I think it's more a fault of society, that people are really kind of stepping away from religion quite a bit. So I think that as parents, you just have to work a lot harder to try to push through all the other information that kids are getting to teach them more about the teachings of the church.
Parents have to have their priorities straight. And that means that they have to have the courage to say, this is what is good for my family, and this is not, even though there's a lot of pressure to do the other thing. That's a courage that's not, a strong macho thing, but it's courage born of love of Christ and the church. And that's what we really need.
Well, of course, it is very important to go to your church that might look a little something like this, that I didn't draw, and also to have church in your own home and to sort of bring the religious teaching home with you. Don't just leave it there in that brick and mortar church. Bring it home. Well, that is it for this edition of Currents. Now, coming up tomorrow, just ahead of diaconate ordinations coming up this Saturday, we introduce you to one soon-to-be deacon and his wife. We'll have that and more coming up on tomorrow's program. But until then, be sure to visit us online. We're over at currentsny.net, We are also on Facebook and on Twitter. For all of us here at Currents, I'm Matt McClure. Thanks so much for watching and have a great night.